Hi there, and welcome back to Lorena's Labyrinth. Obviously, I'm Anna Pirelli, and I'd like to thank you for joining me again today. If you haven't watched the series that I've put up on the anatomy of distress and also the emotions and that kind of stuff, yes, there's a lot of videos involved with it now, but they are a series. I do recommend that you do so because the bottom line is the way we feel and the way we think are quite closely connected and wrapped together, and they are a powerful force. And I'll go into it a bit more detail in the upcoming slides, but basically there's power in thought, there's power in emotion, and this video is going to explore how we can shift and change potentially negative thinking patterns into positive ones. But most of us have heard the phrase, I must say, that, the power of positive thinking, if they haven't heard of Eckhart Tolle or whatever. But while Eckhart, as far as I know, I haven't read any of his books, but he's got a lot of wisdom there. From a psychological perspective or a mental health perspective, that's the fields that I've worked in, and we kind of take a different approach. And the reason why I consider it to be important is obviously for many years I was working within the metaphysical and healing industries before doing my training in social work and mental health. And prior to me doing my studies, I actually thought that I understood what positive thinking was and how to impact or include it in my life. And I actually thought that I had a balanced approach to life, and logical and rational as well as the energetic. But as time went by and with my studies, I recognized that I didn't. So this video is designed to help people unpack thinking processes and to get a greater balance in their life. But let's crack on with it anyway. So I think I've touched upon in the other videos that people are top-down processes or bottom-up processes, and I'll explain this in a minute. But this is the kind of content that I learned when I was at university that became so beneficial to me, And basically, the reason I did the emotions before the thoughts was because, probably influenced by my own biases, I'm a bottom-up processor. And I'm also aware through my mental health training that a lot of the people with emotional dysregulation type disorders, they sort of believe, many of them, I shouldn't say they because that's a blanket statement, but many of them believe or feel invalidated as far as trying to manage their emotions if we talk about the thought aspects before we look at the emotional substance. So within the context of this, just to revisit, people that are bottom-up processors, they feel an emotion or they feel the mood without necessarily knowing why they feel the reason or the urge to do what it is. They're very instinctual and quite intuitive. So it's like, I don't know why, I'm just not comfortable. Okay, so they're bottom up first, I feel it in my bones or whatever. Whereas the top-down processor, they're like, I think that person, for example, is untrustworthy, and then they feel uncomfortable. They become aware of the emotions after they've thought of the thought. So that's the difference between a top-down processor and a bottom-up processor. But whether we're a top-down or a bottom-up, the bottom line is that most of us are working, with this below the iceberg subconscious guides that are directing our actions. And these subconscious guides are actually thoughts, beliefs that we hold about ourselves, and quite often they're false beliefs or they're projections that we've picked up along the way. And so the idea of, as part of creating, if we like, change in our life and empowering ourselves, is actually to be able to dig down into that subconscious, bring it to the conscious surface so that we can unpack it, look at it, and potentially let it go. And this is the process of change and empowerment, which of course is part of my primary focus and direction for doing these videos, is about empowering people to lead a quality of life that they actually desire, and one where they reap the rewards that they desire as well, because everybody deserves to feel loved and be loved. Oftentimes people get confused. They feel or they believe that feelings are thoughts, and this creates a bit of a problem because they're definitely not the same beast, so to speak. Thoughts are the product of the mind, they're the belief system. Feelings, of course, are the emotions, and they're influenced by the thoughts and beliefs that we hold. And the reason we need to be very clear about this is because sometimes we might have and I do the air quotation marks here, a feeling about a person, but we might be actually misinterpreting their actions or applying meaning to their actions or behaviours that actually is completely incorrect, and that's based on what we perceive it to be. And the problem with this is that if we make an inaccurate perception or apply motives and agenda to a person that perhaps reflect upon us poorly or whatever, through this misinterpretation or projection, if you like, of our own insecurities, it can send us on the emotional roller coaster. So just a reminder that an external event is going to occur. They do occur all the time, and it's what we believe, whether you're a bottom-up processor that says, it's not my thoughts that make me feel bad. The belief that you're somehow inadequate, or that somebody would wish ill will upon you, or whatever, that's part of the perception of another person's agendas. And so therefore we will say, within this context, it's the thought. So the way we think and believe, that is going to influence our moods. And of course, if you've watched the other videos, you'll know what I mean by primary, secondary and tertiary emotions, because I cannot be bothered going through it again. They're long videos, I'm sorry about that, but gee, once I've got them out of the way, I'm very glad to see the back of them. Okay, so just a reminder, when we first try to distinguish our thoughts from feelings, it can be very, very easy to confuse them. And by that I mean it can be confusing to identify what's a thought and what's a feeling, but it's very helpful to separate them. So on this slide, I've actually put the videos where I've unpacked the content on how to name your emotions and understand them, because with the video on emotional intelligence and reflection, I provide you with the means to unpack your emotions and how to do a behaviour change from that bottom-up perspective. Whereas with this video, we're going to be taking a different approach because we're looking at thoughts. We can still use that same tool, but we would just take the ABCs approach. Okay, so to run through this, basically we're looking at, when we're doing our reflections this time, we're looking at what are the activating thoughts and beliefs and the consequences of those thoughts and beliefs on not only our mood, but also on our relationships at the end of the day. This is where we're ultimately going to go. So when we talk about the ABCs, we're talking about, as I said, A, the activating thought, which is a situation or incident that occurs that results in a strong emotion from us. Now, it might be a happy event, okay? So these can just be activities that you can do just to explore even your positive and helpful thinking styles, okay? So it's anything that creates a strong emotion, and that might be, if we're talking about a positive one, a happy reconnection with family, and you could explore the emotions that are associated with that particular situation by looking at the Unpacking Emotions video. So this is why I've put the images up there, to make it easier for you to find them. You'll see that it's actually got the names of the videos on there as well. For example, Unpacking Emotions is SH5E1 part 3. Okay, there's 3 parts to that series. Anyway, if we would say unpack the joyous situation, it would be, I feel cared about, I feel included, and, ultimately you take it back to that primary emotion of I feel loved, But on the other hand, you might be feeling sad because you actually weren't invited to a family gathering, and as a consequence you might feel rejected, isolated, alone, unsupported or unloved, and you might have those feelings, but they might not. Okay, so in a different scenario, it might have been that you weren't excluded from an event, but there was no means for you to get to that gathering, and you felt perhaps people could have made a greater effort to include you, which might have been to have the family event closer to where you can get to or whatever. There's all sorts of things, and I say things, but thoughts and beliefs that can influence our mood in ways that can sabotage our ability to feel peace and joy and happiness. And this is where we can benefit, whether we're a bottom-up processor or a top-down processor, because ultimately there is going to be an idea or a thought there that we can unpack. So where the ABC's reflective tool or behavior or activity differs from the original one that I've got, which is called Gibbs in the Unpacking Emotions, the reflection tool, is because when we reflect on the thought, as I say, we look first at the incident that happened and we describe it. We've got to write it down, and we write it in such a way it's like taking a video of it. We don't put any feelings or any thought into it. We just write down a description of events that occurred, and that could include all parties or whatever. Basically just be as if you're a witness at a scene. Once you've written it down, then we look at the consequence. We don't look at the belief yet, we look at the consequence. And this is where we start looking at the feeling or the emotion, that large emotion that occurred. And we write that down, what happened. Before we talk about that, though, I might as well just give you a scenario because it helps to be descriptive. So, okay, here's a little hypothetical. Somebody's on their way home from work. We're in Australia. It's stinking hot. It was 41 degrees the other day. But, regularly people will be on their way home from work thinking, oh, my God, I've got a cold can of Coke in the fridge. I can't wait to have it. Oh, I think I've only got a couple left. Maybe I should go to the shop first. No, I want to go home. I want to have that Coke, and then I'll go down the shop. I'll put my feet up for a little while and wait for it to cool down, and then they get home and it's like somebody drank the Coke. Who drank the Coke? And then it goes off. Hell for leather. Okay. So this scenario I'm painting is somebody's on their way home. We would say in Australia, they're fanging for a can of Coke. They get home, the Coke's gone. They scan. All of a sudden, they've got that horror moment going, oh my God, who drank the Coke? And then it's off like a firecracker. Well, why didn't you ask, So in this scenario, it would be written down something like, I was so upset, I ran outside into my bedroom and closed the doors and burst into tears. Or I went into the shower and I sobbed my heart out and told everyone to naff off, and then went and had a soak in the tub or whatever. And the consequence of this was my partner was very angry with me because I upset my child, who became confused. They hadn't realised they'd done anything wrong because they asked for permission, and I felt they were insensitive. All of this kind of stuff. You really unpack it and you bring it back to the scenario. And I'm going to go through the steps of this in a little while so that you can apply this to your own situations. I felt that nobody cares about how I feel. Everybody expects me to do everything. My partner could have gone to the shop instead of waiting for me to get home. All of this kind of stuff. But the beauty of writing it down is when we write down the emotional consequence to the event or the incident, right? We explore that primary emotion. When we talk about it, I was angry and then I burst into tears, and this is where we're talking about primary, tertiary, or primary, secondary, and tertiary emotions. But when you write it down, you're able to see the emotions because you've just gone back and named them, okay? And then you work out which was the one that was the strongest, and you rate them based on their intensity, say 7 to 100. I was so angry, I had steam coming out my head. I was going off the Richter scale. I was a 95. And then when I was crying and sobbing my heart out and feeling unloved, I was probably about a 70. Okay, so the number one, or the biggest emotion to respond to and address there, would be the anger at the 95. Okay, so we kind of write that down and put that to the side. You can do Googling on these kind of strategies, by the way. And from there, we look at the underpinning beliefs or thoughts that resulted in this extreme mood. And that could be, as I say here, nobody asked me, so I didn't have any choices within this. I felt excluded. And then you would take that back. What is that saying? We'll get there. I'm just bringing you into it, what this all means, okay? Then another belief would be, I have to do everything. There's a burden of responsibility. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm resentful. And then there's the other one, nobody cares about me. I'm unimportant and I'm irrelevant. And then you would rate these thoughts as well. Which is the one that hits the nerve? You give that a rating between 0 and 100 as well. Because the one that, the thought that carries the most weight, that is attached to the strongest emotion. So if we're saying that anger was the strongest emotion here, this is a theoretical. And then the biggest, or the thought that is most closely related to that anger, as I say, that becomes your hot thought. That's the belief that we need to work on, because this is the one that's influencing behaviours. And we'll say here, for example, nobody cares, that, I feel small, unimportant and irrelevant. And especially after a bad day at work, and on a stinking hot 41-degree day, I might add, that will be actually a really big thought, potentially, I say, because of course we're using a hypothetical here. So just to reiterate, when it comes to the belief, you look at the strongest link between the thought and the strongest emotion to identify which is the unhelpful thought. And the reason we do this is because the unhelpful thought or the belief is actually lying beneath conscious awareness. It's that iceberg and it's underneath the surface. And it's through our journaling, obviously, that we're going to be able to discover what's going on within us, where these thoughts are coming from, even if we haven't actually, at this stage, which we're not, because it's a series of steps, we don't discover where they've come from when we're exploring to find the thought. This is the process of finding the unhelpful thoughts. And we've got some questions on this slide here as examples of how you would explore through your reflective journaling what your thoughts are and what the emotions are. So this is kind of linking it together in some ways. If somebody's, for example, got social anxiety and they're put in a situation where they don't want to be, it might be easy for them to turn around and just say, I don't want to be here. So I've actually just identified there the situation or the activating thought is triggered by being put in a situation where they're not comfortable. I don't want to be here. So you question it because people might look at me and think I'm depressed. And is this bad? Why is this bad? Well, they might think something is wrong with me. And what if they do? What's bad about that? Well, they might think I'm crazy. And what does that say about me? Look, I grabbed these questions, I must say, from a website, and I'm not actually sure that I 100% agree with the way this is worded, because I would actually challenge them in different ways, For example, for me, if somebody said, I don't want to be here, oh, okay, well, why not? What's going on? Okay, well, people might look at me and think I'm depressed. Okay, so I would probably say, okay, they might think you're depressed, but why does that matter? What's wrong with that? Well, I don't want them to know I'm depressed. Why is that? This is probably the approach I'd take. Well, why don't you want them to know? Because I feel judged, might be the thing. And okay, so why would you think they're judging you would be my question. And if they are judging you, why does their opinion matter to you? These would probably be ways that I would challenge it. But yeah, it's about asking questions and unpacking it. I can see the relevance in this approach though, okay, because when we're talking about a thought discovery, it's more than just exploring those elements that I'm talking about. It's trying to get you to be as specific as you can, even if it sounds stupid or embarrassing when you think about them, because this is part of learning how to manage moods. And once again, it's very helpful if you can be really specific in your answers as you go through this questioning phase, because this is about repetition, and obviously the more we do things, the better at it we get. And the idea of these activities is to make you an expert at finding those unhelpful thoughts and thinking styles, and there's a number of them. So I really would encourage you to hang in there and see this through. Just a reminder, all of this stuff that I'm giving to you is actually clinical based stuff, and it's part of helping you if you're unable to access a therapist, because frankly, I believe a lot of this stuff you actually do need to have somebody to help you with it, and somebody who's qualified. But certainly within Australia, being able to access a quality clinician or therapist or whatever, it's become very expensive, and there's such demand upon them that the waiting lists are really long. And of course, you get good and bad of everything. So just a reminder that the content I provide is in the absence of you being able to access services, and I do encourage you to try and find somebody. Okay, so anyway, we've just talked about thought discovery, because as I say, this is about making you an expert of your own thought processing and emotional processing, and to help you to understand and identify the feelings and thoughts around particular situations, particularly if you have these large negative emotions associated with the thoughts. And part of this is actually for an early intervention perspective, because if we have large emotional reactions and they continue to go unchecked, they're going to escalate unless we actually address these thoughts behind them. You know, that's just rule of thumb. We have to work with emotions and thoughts together. And when I say that, when we think about the thoughts, working with the thoughts and emotions together, you will learn to link the thoughts not only with the emotions, but also the sensory experiences. Because when we talk about emotions becoming larger based on our unhelpful thinking styles, we will start to notice it in our body, which of course I've got up the videos on the anatomy of distress as well. You know, like people with anxiety, they will continue potentially, if it goes unchecked, this thinking pattern to end up developing tightness in their chest, an increase in blood pressure, perhaps if they get angry. People whose anxiety goes unchecked, well, we know that the body stores stress and anxiety, and it can end up leading to all sorts of physiological problems and even heart problems. And, you know, high blood pressure is a permanent condition. So we want to get in early with this. What else can I say? So doing the ABCs is a form of analysis, and it's about you taking the first step toward learning to be able to manage your moods better and helping yourself feel better, you know. So once we've discovered the thought, that's kind of like unearthing it. We've dug it up, we've brought it up from the subconscious now through our reflective journaling, and we're able to now take a look at these ideas, beliefs and thoughts that we have and identify, are they helpful or unhelpful? Well, obviously if they're creating negative moods and negative emotions and reactions, then they're not very helpful at all. And we can either deal with them or we can avoid them, but that doesn't solve the problem. It just actually potentially compounds the problem and escalates the distress. So the way we do the detective work, of course, is to challenge it. You know, we can think something, but that doesn't mean it's true. You know, we need to be asking, where is the evidence or proof that my thoughts or beliefs are true? You know, if we go back to the can of Coke, nobody loves me, nobody cares about me, all hurt and banged up. You know, the husband's or the partner's probably there scratching and thinking, but, you know, what's the big deal? It wasn't that I didn't care about you. And of course I love you. And if I'd known that it was such a big deal, you know, I'm sorry, I should have done it. You know what I mean? It's, if there's no other actions there to indicate that your partner doesn't love you or care about you, then it's a false thought. It's an unhelpful thought. And you know, how often do we hear people turn around and say, and I know I shouldn't have, and I know it was really silly, because of course I know that my partner loves me, but in that moment I just felt, and I lost my bottle. You know what I mean? So where's the proof and thoughts that my beliefs are true? And is there anything that can disprove my thoughts and beliefs? Well, of course there is. My partner did X and Y positive to show me how much they loved me. So that's ridiculous, you know? And then there's the question, how do I know that my thoughts or beliefs are true? You know, are there things that I'm ignoring or I've overlooked? Are there other explanations, and what could they be? And are my thoughts, beliefs, and expectations realistic? Are they practical? I mean, it was a stinking hot day, 41 degrees. We'll say use that scenario still. Obviously, everybody's going to be stinking hot as well. You know, is it unrealistic, or is it realistic to expect that somebody on a hot day is not going to go and drink the last Coke? And I would actually put another question on there. Where was my responsibility in that situation? If I was really wanting to have a Coke and I knew that everybody would be at home, I'm just throwing an extra scenario in there, then if I really want that Coke and I don't want anybody else to drink it before I get home, what's wrong with making a phone call and saying, hey, look, is there still that one Coke in the fridge? Okay, so this is a way of being realistic and also responsible there, but let's not go into that bit right now. So I just want to make the point here too that perception can be helpful and positive, or it can be helpful or negative, and they can be changed. Whether they're negative or positive, these thoughts can change, and they can be changed. And they start with the identification of this unhelpful style, just reiterating this. But I also want to reiterate that the content that I'm delivering is actually focused and directed towards clinicians when they're working with people who have got significant illness or issues, if we're talking about mental health, and it could be to do with behaviour change. And I think if you look at some of the gaps on the slides, and I'll be sure to point them out, one of the things that I have observed, and I do get it, if we're talking about trying to help somebody perhaps in a psychiatric facility to do change, we're not going to be talking to them about their responsibilities at that point in time because it's a little early in the piece. But I do believe that in day-to-day living, and I will be sure to point it out, as I say, as I go along, that I think that the industry, and this is my opinion, is being a little remiss when they forget to tell people when it comes to emotions and feelings that there's a personal responsibility involved with that. And I'll probably explain that more as I go along. This is because I'm a social worker, and what we struggled with, and when I say we, I talk about myself and some colleagues, what we struggled with was generally with younger people in, say, homeless situations or whatever, who didn't understand that, yes, we all have rights. We have rights to be cared about, and we have rights for people to be sensitive to our feelings and all the rest of it. But equally, everybody else that we interact with as well, they have the same rights. And so we have to, if we expect to be able to have those rights extended to us, then we're kind of, at the very least, morally obligated to extend that same respect, care and regard to them. So that's where the responsibility comes in. But when we're, as professionals working in the mental health profession, got somebody who is a client who is right in the midst, shall we say, of a mental health crisis and having big mood disruptions or whatever, we would never talk to them about responsibilities at that point in time. We're just trying to help them calm and regulate their emotions so that they can express and explore why they feel the way they feel. And so this is what this kind of content is referring to, I guess. So just to reiterate, perception can be helpful or unhelpful, and it can be changed. And the first part of change is to identify when the thoughts and beliefs are unhelpful. And before we can change them and challenge them, the issue is we have to catch them. Okay, so that's where that journal comes in. But often the thoughts and beliefs can come into our personal space so quickly that we don't even realize where the unhelpful thought came from, because they're so embedded in our psyche, if you like, and they're so far beneath the conscious, that iceberg scenario. And these kind of thoughts are where we start looking at mind chatter. These are the automatic thoughts and they will impact on the way we feel. Some of them are going to be neutral, as demonstrated here. I think I'll go to the shops today. Some of them are positive thoughts. Yeah, I'm really confident about this. I can do this. I've got this, right? And some of them are going to be negative. I'm not very good at this. I must be stupid or a slow learner. That's the negative mind speak. It's reflexive mind chatter. Basically, when I say reflexive, it's like you're just on autopilot with it. It's the same as if you're driving a car. Once we've got our license and we've driven a car quite a few times, we don't have to think about it. We just get in the car, turn the ignition on, and off we go. All right? It's reflexive behavior. And this is what the automated mind thoughts are. And we have a responsibility to ourselves to actually learn to harness the power of that mind. In the same way that we drive that vehicle down the road, we can become the driver of our own mind. And that's when we talk about the power of mind, when we take that power and we take control over the direction of our mind and our thinking and where it goes. The negative auto thoughts, they're generally associated with worries and anxieties and insecurities and that, but they can be related to anything. And it can be things that we've seen or heard or learned. We could have picked them up either formally or informally through school systems or just by watching other people and learning from them. This is where, if I was going to really get into the university content, where I'd be saying, there's that whole nature versus nurture. There's still an ongoing debate about, do children learn from their parents or are they just born that way, And usually the negative mind speak is generally very harsh and judgmental, and I would be inclined to say in unreasonable ways and certainly undeserving. And, there's this whole unwarranted low self-opinion and self-belief. And I just want to remind here too that I'm not minimizing people who have got mental health conditions and saying, oh, it's all in your head. That's not the case. Okay, there's plenty of evidence there to support the fact that mind mood is affected by physiological causes such as hormones, illness, or chemical imbalances. But at the same time, we can take that into account and still, regardless of that, work on our thinking and discover those unhelpful thinking patterns so that we can challenge them. So assumptions, I've put this slide in because this is actually an example of a false belief. When we make assumptions about another person's behavior, we usually do so in a way where it's personal. We take stuff personally, and the assumptions are not necessarily based on reality. In fact, they rarely are. So in this example, we're talking about somebody in a social setting. Let's say you've gone to a party. Well, let's say not you, somebody then. And you're talking to a bloke called Dave. Now, Dave seems to be very uncomfortable. He's shifting in his chair and he doesn't particularly seem interested in the conversation, and he's looking away quite a lot, and he appears to be very disinterested. And if you do speak to him, he replies quite curtly or tersely or whatever. It's kind of like the obligatory conversation, and you feel that he's just being polite. But anyway, the first thought, here's a couple of examples of exploring what is the emotion and the thought, how they link together. So if your first thought is, he can't even make eye contact with me when we're talking, he is so rude, he's obviously a dishonest person, he's just nasty, right? There could be that kind of reaction. So you think about, well, what does that make me feel like on the inside if I think that he's an untrustworthy person and very, very rude? What emotion might I attach to that? And what does it reflect about me? Okay. Then the next one is, well, he can't even look at me when he's talking to me. I must be really ugly and unattractive. And then there's the other one, because I know, look, I'm sure you've done it. I know I've done it at different times. Have I got something on my face? Have I got a booger on my face? Have I got sleep in my eyes? Have I left food on my face when I last ate? I'm still taking it personally and making his behavior about me. It's all personal stuff. And then the next one is the thought of, oh, well, obviously I'm boring. he must be waiting for somebody else to arrive so that he can talk to them. Once again, I'm personalising that behaviour to be about me when it might not be. And we're going to explore this in the next slides. We're going to challenge the thought, okay? We're going to ask ourselves a couple of questions, What other ways are there to see this situation of Dave shifting in his chair? How might other people see this situation? I mean, there might be stuff going on for Dave that we don't know about. If somebody else was sitting there, would they see and read his behaviour to be rude and discourteous? Do they think he looks shifty? I mean, you don't have to ask him. This is stuff that you're asking yourself. Are there any other possible explanations for his behaviour? And is there a possibility that I can revise my original thought to include these other possibilities? And then I'm going to go on to the next slide and give you a little bit more extra information. So once again, I'm just really painting some oblique scenarios here because it's quite difficult without something to really put my hand to and talk about. So within this case, we're challenging some of these assumptions. We're going to look at the behaviours to start with. Okay, he can't make eye contact with me when we're talking. He's being rude. Okay, so this is a defensive type thought. And for me, I would infer that indicates that the person, me, if I was thinking that, was one of not feeling good enough, that I'm somehow inadequate to have a conversation with, and projecting, my belief that he thinks I'm not good enough, throwing it back at him. Then the thought, I must be really ugly and unattractive. Have I got a booger on my face? Well, that's the insecurities, a person's personal insecurities coming to the fore. Once again, not feeling good enough, that there's something wrong with them. And then he must be waiting for somebody else to arrive to talk to. That, of course, infers that not interesting enough, not good enough. It all comes back to feeling not good enough. So it's insecurities there. But from an emotional perspective, if you were doing this yourself, you would take it back to that name it, tame it, emotional stuff. And then you would, if you were challenging these perceptions and assumptions by, asking what else is going on there, what might other people see, and all of this kind of stuff, you might actually change your viewpoint there. And you might even reach that conclusion, actually, if you're not personalizing it, he seems very distracted and anxious. I wonder if everything is okay for him, with him and for him. So, you've got an option there. You've got choices, and choices are empowering. So you can turn around and ask the question, are you okay? Because the worst case scenario is that he's going to turn around and say, actually, no, I'm not. Or yes, I'm fine. And you know that he's lying. But you'll know to terminate any form of conversation and to move away to be with somebody that you actually will feel valued by. You're not going to waste time talking to somebody that actually, we can't all be everybody's idea of a good conversationalist. But where I'm going with this is all of these feelings of insecurity usually are not personal, even though we're taking them personal. If you ask the question, Dave might actually turn around and say, well, actually, no, I'm not. I'm really worried at the moment. I'm expecting my friend to have arrived or my partner to have arrived by now, and I haven't been able to get them on the phone, and I know the freeway's very congested, so I'm a bit concerned they've been caught in traffic or they've had an accident or something's happened, But you will know by asking questions and getting clarity. But anyway, where I'm going with this is we can be making assumptions about a person's behaviour that are not based on any form of reality whatsoever. I'm going to have to wind this video up and break this into two parts because we've already hit 40 minutes. So what I'll do is, with the next video, I'm going to discuss these particular unhelpful thinking styles in greater detail, because this is the important stuff that, when I was saying at the beginning of the video that I thought that I understood and I had a balance of thinking and all the rest of it, but I didn't recognize within myself that I had unhelpful thinking styles because I wasn't aware. I didn't know about these. And what we don't know, we can't change, remember? It's all below the surface and in the subconscious. So basically the aim is to bring this information to you so that you can see and recognize within yourself if there's any changes that you can make to your own thinking before these thinking styles become hugely problematic for you. And this is where we will be really getting into the empowerment stuff. This is where you will end up becoming an expert on your own thinking and understand yourself, your motivations, your reactions, and your behaviors. And ultimately, it's going to have a positive impact, at least on the way you feel, and at best on your relationships with those people around you. So for now, I'm just going to say, look, thank you very much for being part of the journey. I hope you found it valuable. Just a reminder, this is clinical type content, and although it doesn't have to just be for people with mental illness, although people who have got an illness will actually benefit from it. So I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Take care, my friends. Part 2 will be on next Friday. All right, take care. Love yous and leave yous. Bye-bye for now.